Now that we got the getAllPosts and getFeaturedPosts functions, let's use them. For example, on the starting page, so that there we can get rid of that dummy posts array, and instead we load posts from our own data source. And when it comes to fetching data for a page, we also learned how that works. We want to use getStaticProps or getServerSideProps. In reality, of course, we don't need either of the two. We could also use useEffect inside of our component and send a HTTP request to some API. But that means that the pre-rendered page won't contain any content, which isn't great for search engines. And in this specific website here, we would also have a problem. We have no API. Our posts are fetched from the file system, and we can therefore do that in any code that runs on the server side and has access to that file system, but we can't do it from inside our components. Those don't have access to the file system, and there we also can't send a request to any API that grants that access because we have no such API here. We could build an API route, but why would we do that? Then we would be able to fetch data without having it pre-rendered, and we would still have the search engine disadvantage. Therefore, it definitely makes most sense here to add the separate getStaticProps function here. In here, we want to get all the featured posts, and that's super simple because in that lib folder in which we just worked, in that file there, we export a getFeaturedPosts function, which does just that. So here in getStaticProps, we can get our featured posts by calling getFeaturedPosts. And you just need to make sure that you add an import, importing getFeaturedPosts from that lib folder and the posts util file. If you do that, you got the featured posts here, and then you learned earlier in the course that in getStaticProps, we should return an object with a props key where we then can pass any props of our choice to the component. Now here, I guess it makes sense to set a posts prop which holds those loaded featured posts. And that's already all we have to do in getStaticProps here. Nothing else is required for this use case. Now we could also be using getServerSideProps to always fetch all the featured posts when a request reaches this page, but that doesn't make sense here, I would say. It will just slow down this page a lot because we have to go through all the files and go through all the posts for every request without gaining much. Our posts will probably not change every second. After all, we have to change a Markdown file to update them. So they are fairly stable. Most posts will probably never change. So getStaticProps makes sense. Now we could add the revalidate key here to make it clear that getStaticProps should not just be executed once during the build process, as you learned, but also at least once every 100 seconds, or every 60 seconds, or whatever you want, for a new incoming request. This would ensure that if our data changed after deployment, we still regenerate our post, and we therefore reflect that latest data without rebuilding and redeploying. We could do that, but again, our posts will probably not change that much. So if you want to set revalidate to have that built-in rebuilding step, you want to definitely set it to a long duration, maybe 10 minutes or even longer, like half an hour. And here I will not set it at all. Which means getStaticProps will only be executed once outside of development. During development, it will be executed for every request. But outside of development, it will only be executed when we build the application for production and never thereafter. And I would say this is absolutely fine here for this scenario. Okay, so now with that, we have getStaticProps. We set the posts prop, which holds the featured posts, and that means that in homepage, we should accept props and then pass props.posts as a value to the posts prop on featured posts. If we now save all of that, and we go back to the starting page, there we should see one featured post now. And now here, the data is actually coming from our Markdown file. So if I change something there, like the date from 15th to 16th, then since we're in development and getStaticProps runs for every request, then we'll see that if I reload, this switched to 16th as well. So this data is coming from the Markdown file. And now we can do something similar in the All Posts page. Of course, feel free to try this on your own first. Here's your chance to pause the video and try it on your own first. After a short pause, we'll implement it together. Were you successful? Let's implement it together on that All Posts page. There, it's very similar to the starting page. So here in Posts index.js, we don't want to use the dummy posts anymore. We want to get rid of that. Instead, we want to fetch posts from our actual data source. And again, for this, I'll use getStaticProps. So I'll export a function, getStaticProps, to fetch my posts here. Again, getServer-side-props makes no sense for me because we don't want to fetch all the posts for every request. That would not be that great for performance. Instead, doing it once during the build process should be enough. If we ever update our files thereafter and we want to reflect those changes, we just have to rebuild and redeploy. But we're probably not doing that multiple times every day. And if we ever add a new post, since it's part of the overall project folder, we will need to redeploy anyways. So that also won't be a problem. Hence here, again, I will just call getAllPosts and make sure to add that import to the getAllPosts function here. And this then gives us all the posts, and we then just return an object with the props key, which holds the props object, where we can set posts to all posts. Again, we could add revalidate, but for the reasons explained before, I'll not do it here, because if we add a new post, we'll have to redeploy anyways, since it's part of the overall project folder. And if we change an existing post, we can also redeploy. We're probably not doing that all the time. Hence now here in the All Posts page, we get our props now, and we now use props.posts, since I used posts here, as a value for posts on all posts. And yes, that is a lot of posts, I know. But now with that, if we save this and reload the All Posts page, we only got one post left here, and that is that one single post for which we added a Markdown file. Let's now work on the single post page, and let's fetch the actual post data from the Markdown file here as well, and let's make sure that everything is output correctly.